Hi, Jesse. Hi, Amber.
I can't hear anything. Hold on one quick minute. Let me see if.
Okay.
Let's see if
Okay, there we go. My volume was down.
Okay. Well, that will do it. Yes. Okay. Now we're all up here. Hi, everybody. And so we
okay. Can
just
you
sent
guys
out
hear me?
our invitations. We can hear you. Absolutely. And we'll give it just a second more, but it'll give people a chance to adjust their images on their screens. So if you use your thumb and forefinger and touch the photos, the images of Jesse or Amber or myself on the screen, you can expand them or contract them or move them around on your screen so that you can see them better, because it's always fun to see faces behind the voices. And then we're going to go ahead and get started, and people can filter in as they are able. So, hello, Firesiders, and welcome to Adventures by the Book, where our mission is to connect people and communities through the power and actually superpower of books. I'm your host, Susan McBeth, and I'm delighted to have debut author Jesse Leon back today to continue our discussion of his memoir, I'm Not Broken. This beauty, which actually doesn't publish until August, but we're having an early four-part discussion to get you excited about the book and learn more about Jesse and his life. Each week, we're focusing on a different aspect of Jesse's story. But before I introduce Jesse, I wanted to welcome everyone who is in our virtual studio audience below, who, as you know, if you're in the virtual studio audience, you can invite yourself up on stage at any time to ask questions or converse live with Jesse or any of our team. And I also want to thank those of you who are joining us from our public profile page and also on any of our social media channels. For those of you who wish to broadcast this event, you too can do so on your own social media channels. All you have to do is click into the hamburger, which is the circle in the lower left-hand corner of your screen, and hit broadcast to the world. And this event will be shared with everybody on your following. And one of the beauty features of Fireside is that you can chat live with our virtual stage, anyone on our virtual stage. So again, a reminder that you can come up anytime. We will reserve questions at the end, but if you feel so compelled to come speak in the middle of the event, feel free to invite yourself. We'd love to hear your story too. Jesse's memoir, I'm Not Broken, is his extraordinary story of resilience and survival that shines a light on his childhood spent devastated by sex trafficking, street life, and substance abuse. Our conversations each week with him are focusing on a different aspect of Jesse's identity that are described in the book, while also detailing the possibilities of self-transformation and self-acceptance, including coming to terms with various aspects of his identity. If you haven't already pre-ordered a copy of the book, we encourage you to do so at any of your favorite bookstores, but or especially on our Adventures by the Book website, which, as you can see in the fortune cookie in the middle of your screen, the link to our website is there. You can go to and pre-order a copy of his book, which will be shipped to you in August upon publication. And we encourage you to do that. We will be talking a lot about the book, but we are going to save a lot of juicy details so that you have to read the book too. We are going to learn a lot about him, but I did want to give you a little background into his current life. Now, for those of you who joined us last week, you probably already heard this, but I think it bears repeating because not only is he accomplished in in all that he has done, but considering where he has come from and the challenges and obstacles he's overcome to get there is absolutely remarkable and impressive. So, besides being a newly or soon to be published author, he is a social impact consultant to foundations, investors, nonprofits, and real estate developers on ways to address issues of substance abuse, affordable housing, and educational opportunities for at-risk youth, which he is very well versed to speak, right? Yes, exactly. Since receiving a master's degree from the Harvard Kennedy School, Jesse has managed multi-million-dollar philanthropic grant making for various foundations and banking institutions, and he has managed over $1 billion in public sector investments for affordable housing and built thousands of units of mixed income housing as a real estate developer for Bank of America. Last week, we talked to Jesse and focused on his identity as a member of the LGBTQ plus community. And today we're going to chat with him about his identity as a child of Mexican immigrants and about race in general. So Jesse, thank you for being so brave and bold as to share your story. We're honored to host you today, and congratulations again on the new book.
Thank you. I hope everyone can hear me. Thumbs up if you can.
We can
All right.
definitely hear
Great,
you.
great.
Yes, you
It's
are good. And we also have on stage Amber Reinhardt, and Amber works with us at Adventures by the Book. And the reason I invited her on stage is because she is the granddaughter of Mexican immigrants. And when she read this book, she was very touched and moved by it. She connected with so many aspects of the book, and she says, "I have so many questions I want you to ask Jesse." And I said, "Well, why don't you just come on stage and ask him yourself? I think he'd love to hear from you." So she's going to be my co-moderator today. Welcome, Amber.
Hi, everyone. Jesse, it's fantastic to see you again. I love your book so much. So I'm so excited to dive in and learn some more.
Yeah, she hasn't stopped talking about it. So it's really already, it hasn't even been published yet, and you're already touching people, Jesse. It's remarkable. So as a reminder, we decided we wanted to start each episode by having Jesse do a brief reading about the context for today's discussion. So can you talk a little bit about what you're going to be reading before you do so to kind of set it in motion for us?
Yes, definitely. And once again, Jesse Leon, author of I'm Not Broken. I'm excited to be here. Bear with me. I've been in studio since last Thursday. So my throat is a little messed up as I've been reading nonstop for about 8 hours, doing my audiobook, and we wrapped it up today. So I'm super excited to have had that opportunity. And we're in the middle of translating the book into Spanish and eventually going to do an audiobook in Spanish as well. So thank you. And I wanted to share that the book got its first star review by the Library Journal, which I had no clue what it was. But when I found out that it's a pretty big thing within library circles and librarians, so I'm really excited that it's getting out there, and that my dream of ensuring that others find hope and not give up in spite of difficult life circumstances, that I'm able to turn my scars into hope for others. So thank you for having me, and thank you for allowing me to be here. I wanted to read a piece about, so I did an op-ed piece in the LA Times a few weeks ago, about 3 to 4 Sundays ago, on access to mental health and the importance of culturally competent and access to mental health services for BIPOC individuals and communities of color. And so let me just start. It's actually, the scene is where my mom and I are in our very first therapist appointment. And the therapist was assigned to us by the state, the Victim Witness Program. And you'll have to read the book as to why I was assigned to this therapist. But here goes. Ama made me introduce myself formally. Jesse Leon para servirle, a customary phrase in my social economic class. Jesse Leon at your service. Ama did the same. The therapist shook each of our hands with indifference, directing us to sit down. Ama and I sat awkwardly on the velvet couch. The therapist sat in the black leather chair. She lacked the good grace often found in Latino culture to help others with smiles on our faces. She wouldn't even make eye contact with Ama when speaking to her. Instead, she fumbled through papers, handing some to me for Ama to sign without explaining what they said. Do we have to fill out this section? I asked, pointing to a document. Just fill it out for her as best you can and tell her to sign it, she responded, not looking at me either. Once the paperwork was out of the way, she told Ama, as I translated, Jesus will need to come see me once per week after school. You have no need to come back. If I have any documents that you need to sign, I will send them with Jesus, and he can bring them back to you. He can bring them back to our next appointment. Do you have any questions? I hated that she was calling me Jesus when I already introduced myself as Jesse. Yes, I do. How do we make sure he gets better? How can we help him? Will we have a family therapy session? How will you give me updates on how he's doing if you don't have an interpreter? Amma asked with tears in her eyes as I interpreted, and her hand held mine. If I need to see you, I will let you know. I don't need an interpreter. Jesus here seems to be doing a good job at it. My meetings with Jesus will be confidential. I will not be discussing the things we talk about with you unless he decides he wants to hurt himself or someone else. As I said, I will let you know when we need to meet again, she told my mom, now looking directly into her eyes as though trying to intimidate her. I could sense Amma tensing, wanting to lash back. So we will not have family therapy sessions? Amma asked coldly, wiping the quickly drying tears from her eyes. No, we will not. I need to get to know Jesus first. If I have any questions, I will ask them through Jesus. But he's been lying. He's been keeping things from me for years. I see you're getting paid $125 per hour according to the documents I just signed. I'm sure you can afford an interpreter. The state does not pay for interpreters, and unfortunately, you can't afford it, she told Amma. Looking at me, the therapist said, we are out of time. As we have gone over our 45 minutes, I will see you here every Monday after school for our sessions. Now, goodbye and have a good day. She stood up, walked to the door, and opened it, letting us know it was time for us to go. The chapter goes on a little bit, and then it ends with, it was 1988, and my mom was making California's minimum wage at the time, $4.25 per hour. Can you imagine how many days I'd have to work for just 1 hour with her? Shit, 45 minutes. It's not even a full hour. She must be rich. I just hope she helps you, mijo, Amma said, kissing the top of my head as we sat at the bus stop, waiting to go home.
Oh my God. There is so much to unpack in that reading. When I read that section, I was just so horrified and angry, and I had no words. And it was funny when Amber and I were talking about today's episode and what we wanted to discuss. That was the first thing she brought up too. And she says, I can't believe that. I need to talk to him about this. So, Amber, I'm going to let you take it away because I know this was a scene that really bothered you as well. And obviously, I mean, it's still emotional to Jesse today, understandably. So go ahead, Amber.
Yes, Jesse, I read your article and I also was very bothered by that section of the book and, you know, the incident that led to that section. And I don't want to give too much away, so we don't have to talk about that. But on that same topic, you know, you grew up, you were a child from Mexican immigrants, and that played a factor in your everyday life. Everywhere you went, everyone you met, it affected you. And so I kind of want to rewind and go back to the beginning when you introduced two kind of concepts to the reader. You had, I call it the butterfly concept from your father, and then your mom kind of created this very warming, embracing, creative concept where you were coloring, cooking, cleaning, and you just felt like yourself. And I just want to know, like, can you elaborate a little bit on how those two concepts clashed and how they helped define your past?
Wow. Sounds like we're getting into machismo without wanting to address machismo. Because what I don't want to do is I don't want to generalize about machismo in Latino culture.
Yeah.
Right now, there's a movement where a lot of authors are discussing machismo and Latino culture. And all I can really discuss is my personal experiences experiencing machismo in my household and in my community, but my interpretation and my struggles with it.
Yes.
So my dad, it was interesting how he used the term mariposa.
Mm-hmm.
He never said anything homophobic. He wasn't outwardly homophobic towards anyone. So I wasn't raised in that homophobic culture. The terms like puto, maricón, all that weren't said in the household. But I wasn't like my brother. My brother was the sports playing, mechanic, bike fixing guy. He did all the manly things. He was light skinned. I was not. He was muscular. I was not. He had perfect eyesight. I didn't. I had the welfare glasses. And so I loved to read. I loved to draw. I loved coloring books. And I also loved helping my mom in the kitchen. I loved cooking. I loved ironing. I loved washing clothes and hanging the clothes on the clotheslines in the backyard with her, or the back of the apartments. It wasn't a backyard. The back end of the apartments lining the back alley. And so my dad, when he would ask for a plier, I would give him a wrench. If he asked for a wrench, I'd give him a screwdriver. And at one point, he just would give up and he'd be like, bueno pa nada, which means good for nothing. Lárgate, cabrón, pinche bueno pa nada. Go help your mom in the kitchen. That's all you're good for. And then when my mom, he made a comment to my mom. We were separating the beans and me and my mom would be talking, and then we'd go in the kitchen and I'd help her cut all the vegetables for salsa. And he'd make these snide comments of, lo vas a convertir mariposa. You're going to convert him into a butterfly. But see, I was a kid, so to me, I thought butterflies were like gorgeous, right? They were these caterpillars that would cocoon and then blossom into these beautiful flying creatures. So I would tie my shirt. I remember watching Wonder Woman, and I would tie my shirt in a bow and spin around in circles after a Wonder Woman episode in the living room, knowing that I couldn't do it if my dad was around. And so my mom would laugh and just cheer me on, and she would remind me that Linda Carter was Mexican. And so even more pride, right? But there was this understanding that it wasn't okay for me to be soft, for me to be doing the things I was doing that weren't considered masculine within the Mexican household I grew up in.
Yeah, sure.
But don't you see the irony of it? That you actually did morph into a beautiful creature.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you, Susan. But it's funny because my dad would force me to do math tables every night. 1 plus 1 all the way to 1 plus 12. When I was done with addition, I would have to go to subtraction. When I was done with subtraction, I would have to go to multiplication. And when I was done with multiplication, I had to go to division. And this is as far back as I could think of, maybe first grade. So even though he would encourage me to be good at mathematics, but he wouldn't encourage me to be good at drawing and helping with household chores. It's this weird dichotomy.
Yeah. While reading the book, it was very clear that your father had an impact on your life, but more so to me, I think your mom did. And just from reading chapter to chapter, she was strong, warm, resilient. I saw people, she resembled a lot of people in my family. So she was someone that I really wanted to talk to you about today. And there's actually a quote that I tagged that you wrote about her. And if it's okay, I'd like to share it, and then maybe you can share your thoughts on it. You wrote, like for so many immigrant parents, there was no one to turn to when her kids were recruited by gangs or started using. She didn't know where to turn to other than the church, where oftentimes people didn't know what to do either. At least she never gave up hope. So I just feel like that quote really is a true testament to her character. And if you can just elaborate a little bit more on what that quote meant and how your mom really kind of was your support system throughout everything.
Wow. And thanks for mentioning that quote.
Yeah.
Because a lot of, when people ask me what my memoir is about, I tell folks that, yes, it's a story of my journey in my life, of moving from survival to thriving, but it's also the story of my mother
Yeah.
and her mother and her grandmother and my dad's side of the family as well. So I consider it a story of mothers, of women, and the generations of women and the strength that they would pull out of themselves to endure, to thrive in spite of life circumstances. My mom wasn't the only mom in the neighborhood who was dealing with kids that were being recruited by gangs, that were experimenting with drugs, that were having sex and doing things that we weren't supposed to be doing back in the home country. Right. And so, but like many, didn't know where to go for help.
Yeah.
And so mothers, these families, these mothers I would see in the neighborhood would somewhat suffer in silence, because there was also this sense of not knowing that what happens in the home stays in the home. You don't talk about it externally. And so when you couple that with mental health, if you said va al psicólogo o va al psiquiatra, it's like, oh, he's crazy. He's going to see the psychologist because he's a little loco. And so the issue of stigma, I think, is huge in our communities, and be able to break through that stigma, that accessing mental health is okay. But we're only having that conversation now. My mom still won't go to therapy. My mom still struggles for me going to therapy. She prefers me going to recovery meetings like Narcotics Anonymous because she saw how much I changed in a 12-step program. What she struggled with is she equates therapy as years of money down the drain by the state that did not help me. And instead, I went down the rabbit hole of destruction with drug use, sex work, and homelessness.
Well, how could she not think that after the experience she had going with you?
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
and like to elaborate more on, mental and physical help that minority communities do not get oftentimes and that they deserve, like everyone else. There was a moment in the book that kind of like pushed me over the edge, and I'm sure readers who come along it in the future will think so as well. But it was a moment when you and your mother found out that she had cancer in her uterus and cysts throughout her fallopian tubes. Very difficult, very tough. I kind of had to take a pause when I was reading it, just because I couldn't believe what I heard next. But to quote you, all of this could have been avoided. Had you come here years ago, we could have solved this problem. Them gringo doctors aren't helping you any. So what you had to do was you had to leave America and go somewhere else to receive the help that you should have got several visits before. So I just wanted you to, if you feel comfortable, sharing a little bit about what was going through your head at that time, and what can we do to make things better nowadays?
What was going through my head at that time was survival.
Yeah.
So in the book, there's a scene where I find my mom on the floor of the bathroom with blood all around her and having to rush her to the ER and still not getting the medical treatment and being misdiagnosed. I'm still angry about that. Those that know me and those that are on this platform know that I'm my mom's medical advocate. All of her doctors at Kaiser know me. I'm her advocate. And let them try not to respond to a question that I have. I will escalate the shit out of a situation because of what I lived through with my mom. Because see, in our culture, you don't question teachers, you don't question doctors or authority. At least in the subservient social economic status that my family had in Mexico, which was servitude. Even in our language and how Mexicans say what? We're very different than any other Latino culture. We say mande. Mande means order me.
Yep.
Right? So even in our language, it's this sense of servitude. And if you deviate from it, you're not being humble. You're being arrogant. And so for me at that moment, it was about survival. And what I've had to do is, well, I live in San Diego, so Tijuana's right here.
Hmm.
Hundreds of Americans now go over the border for dermatology, for dental work,
Yeah.
for gynecology, OBGYN issues, because it's too expensive on this side of the border.
Yeah.
And so it's sad. What I've had to do with my mom is my mom recently had full knee replacement. And it was beautiful to see my brother. My sister, she's done it. But my brother is older than me, hyper masculine. I don't know if my brother's ever bathed my mom. I've bathed my mom since that chapter early on. I'm in her gynecology appointments. I'm in her doctor appointments. I take her to her mammograms. I have no issue seeing my mom naked and helping her change, putting on her diapers, cleaning her feet. But it was beautiful that during this last surgery, she had a full knee replacement, how my brother stepped up and
Wow.
walked through that uncomfortableness
Yeah.
of being like this man who's being forced to be the caregiver for his aging mother. So there's this issue, I think, of I don't think my mom had it. I don't know if it's shyness but being able to be there in doctor appointments, being able to do suppositories, all those things that go along with being a caregiver when even language barriers are a challenge and an issue. I had to get over my bullshit and suit up and show up for my mom.
You know what
Yeah.
I was thinking as you were talking about that is in this culture, it's encouraged the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So if you wanted better therapy or a different therapist or medical care, you act as your own advocate. You get someone to advocate for you. But if you're part of a culture that is not generally accepted, the squeaky wheel isn't looked upon quite the
Yeah.
same way.
Kind of. The hard part for a lot of people, I would say, that don't speak English and are not from this country, a lot of times we don't even know what's available. We don't even know what questions to ask. And so it's kind of like me on my journey with education. I didn't know about education abroad. Someone told me about education abroad programs. It wasn't like we talked about it at the dinner table. And so I didn't know what services were available for my mom. She didn't know. And it was definitely not something that was freely offered. Even now with Kaiser, her social worker, my social worker is great. Her social worker, oh my God, I'm constantly having to step in and say, well, did you hear about this program? Oh no, I haven't heard about it, but I'll research it. Let me see what I can do. And I'm thinking, damn, this is your job. So
Yeah.
a lot of times it's being able, I wish we had more resources.
Hmm.
I don't know if it's the nonprofit sector or if the HMOs actually had resources of navigators on the health system that weren't strictly on digital platform. But that hand holding that oftentimes our seniors that are immigrants in this country that don't speak English oftentimes need. My mom still doesn't know how to use a cell phone. So, yeah, I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, I mean, the part that kind of like really pulled at my heartstrings was the very last, part of that chapter when you quoted your mom. She said, "I wish I was smart and knew how to communicate to them in English, but I don't, mijo, and this is my fault." And that was like, it is never her fault. No, absolutely not. So that was a really, eye-opening chapter for me, and I appreciate you for sharing that. I'd like to shift gears over to another topic on race. Police brutality. So, there was quite a few examples in the book of you just, coming into some very serious situations that were not your fault at all, but they made you their problem. And so I'll just share a quote that you from the book. You say, "Being Latino was reason enough to get hurt. Driving while Mexican was evidently a crime. It was routine to get pulled over, even if we weren't breaking any laws. It was those times when I most felt like I was waiting to explode. My powerlessness in face of brutal force enraged me even more. It enraged me just reading that. So if you don't mind, elaborating on that quote and any of the thoughts that come to your mind, I'd love to hear some more.
This reminds me of, so today when finishing my audiobook, I was asked, if you didn't read your own audiobook, who would you have had read it?
Okay.
And I was struggling, right? Because I thought, well, Lin-Manuel Miranda. I thought Michael Peña. But then I thought of Julio Macias. Julio played Spooky on my block. But if you see this actor in real life, he's not a cholo. But he talked about in an interview, and I saw this last night. He talked in an interview how when he was preparing for the role of Spooky, they like painted these tattoos on him. They made him shave his head. He looked like a cholo. And for the first time, he started experiencing being pulled over and stopped by police. And so it is our daily reality. Oftentimes, just being Latino. And so I remember walking home from Harvard, also in my chapter, and being pulled over by police, the countless times of walking home from school with my backpack on as a student and getting pulled over and searched by police officers.
Yeah.
Yet I also got lucky because in the editing process, there's a lot that was left out. But I got lucky. Lucky that I didn't get killed by police like so many others have. When you're pulled out of a car, you're thrown on the ground, you're kicked around, you're held down. All you're praying for is that one, someone is around to help you. But back then there were no cell phones. And grateful that nothing was found in the car because I had nothing. And two, that I lived to go home. And that's the type of trauma that I think that is a type of trauma that a lot of people of color, especially raised in urban areas and low income neighborhoods, have on our shoulders constantly, even questioning those that are meant to be protecting us. Not all cops are bad. As you saw in the book, the school police officer did the best he could to try to help me within the parameters and the resources he had at his disposal. But even he didn't know how to help.
Yeah.
And for those of you who are just joining us, just a reminder that we are speaking with Jesse Leon, the author of the upcoming memoir, I'm Not Broken, about his life. And this is a 4-part miniseries on different aspects of his identity. Today we are talking about being the child of Mexican immigrants and race in general. I know that Amber has more questions for you, but I just wanted to remind the audience that if you have any questions or thoughts, anything you want to share with Jesse or with the audience, feel free to invite yourself up on stage. We encourage your participation. And until we hear from you, Amber, I know you have other questions for him.
I do. So you kind of mentioned it before, Jesse, talking about the machismo style that you grew up with, that you were familiar with, and what you saw, in your community growing up. And so there were several times throughout the book when you were in social settings and you either felt like you didn't belong because people weren't dressed the way you were, or you could pick out and know, okay, that person, I know I can see that I can talk to them just based off of looks. And several times I noticed a big symbol was the beanie. You would use your beanie to kind of hide and protect yourself, almost like an armor. And so towards the end of the book, you go off through school to Madrid and you meet someone there and he says to you, why do you hide your beautiful body behind all those baggy clothes? And so I think that for me as the reader, it was very liberating to feel you kind of coming out of that beanie that you've been wearing and just being yourself. And so I was just wondering if you could express that feeling of maybe not dressing how you've always felt like you had to dress and then wearing something new.
Wow. You totally caught that. Wow, that is deep. Because people that knew me early on in my recovery knew that depending on how uncomfortable I was, the farther down my beanie would go. And oftentimes I wore my beanie right to the tip of my eyes so I can try to hide behind my beanie as much as I could. It was my armor.
Yeah.
And it's sad for me, not others in my culture. I'm not trying to generalize. My fear in writing that piece of coming, it's fucked up. I had to leave. I had to go to Spain to live in a country where I had no familial, no real friendship, no cultural or no machismo ties to be able to explore and experiment with new things. And one would say, well, you could have done that here. You could have done that in Mexico. I couldn't. I found this liberating freedom. That's why I'm a huge advocate for people to study abroad, for people to travel, for people to like experience new cultures and new things and breaking out of our own bubble and trying on new things. And so for me, I remember putting on these fitted pants. My Dickies were always super baggy. My jeans were super baggy. So feeling these tight fitting pants, I was like, damn, hell nah, this shit is constraining. Body fitting shirts, I was like, dude, I feel gay. And he's like, well, welcome to Europe, man. Everyone kind of looks gay. So get over yourself. And being okay. But I also realized one other thing, though, and that I wanted to touch on. Because I was sexually abused and because sex work was so important for me, wearing baggy clothes was also something I used to my advantage. Because if I took off my Pendleton, if I took off a Charlie Brown shirt and showed off my muscles in a tank top, it was something I chose to do. And so it was also a sense of protection to hide so I wouldn't be objectified unless I wanted you to objectify me as a sex worker.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for sharing about that. I just found it, like you go through so much of the book watching you just, hiding almost everything that you're feeling. And then I felt when we got to this moment, I was just so happy. I was smiling along with you reading that. I have one more question that I want to ask, and it's about your voice. And it's about, the book in general, but more importantly, the scene at Harvard. It's a paragraph where I just felt like you kind of, you just really shined, your voice really shined through. And it was, you were talking about, you said, this, I'll quote you. In that environment, I spoke up about issues of race, class, gender, and sexuality. I had no idea what I was in for. Being outspoken and liberal at UC Berkeley is one thing, but being outspoken and liberal at Harvard is another. In leadership terms, I was killed off. The manner in which I spoke, my body language, my demeanor, my tone, the language I used, my posture, the color of my skin, how I dressed, my tattoos, the fact that I spoke up and always participated, you name it. Everything about me reminded others of those people, the kinds of people who those in positions of leadership have to deal with. And I just want to say, like, you recognized all of that about yourself, but then you still raised your hand and you still spoke up. And that's what you did with this book, and that's what you did in class, and that's what got you into Harvard. And I just want you to, if you can, share with us what it was like kind of almost just accepting everything that you are and still having the bravery and the strength to talk about that and to not be afraid what those other people in class think of what you say.
When the readers get to that chapter, it was really painful. But what kept me going was my mom. My mom used to dress up every year as Santa Claus in elementary school. She was a cafeteria school lunch lady. and they took this out of the book. And I remember being angry that they took it out of the book because my mom looked forward. She would go to the Salvation Army. We'd get all these toys donated. She'd get this giant bag. She'd get candy canes, and she would walk around the school. My mom was pretty chunky. She'd put on her white beard, her Santa Claus suit, ho, 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 ho. Not even ho, 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 right? So it was like Santa Mom. And she didn't care making fun of herself to make others feel good. She didn't care having to be at the forefront to fight for others to feel welcomed. And so my mom and the stories of her being engaged in PTA and suiting up and showing up in spite of not knowing the language, in spite of oftentimes being discriminated and not treated as if she was welcomed, but she was always at the table. And so you're either at the table or you're on the menu. And one thing I talk about is I learned in that classroom that I will always represent a segment of this population to others. And I felt it was my duty to speak to issues of race and inequality as matters that need to be addressed up front and not treated like add-ons or second thoughts in the creation of public policy. If we're not at the table, those decisions will be made for us. And so oftentimes I am the only Latino person at the table. Oftentimes I am the only man of color at the table. Oftentimes I am the only gay man at the table. And so I choose, not that everyone else needs to. This is a role that I've made a decision that I choose to play, oftentimes at the risk of being killed off in leadership terms. But I've had to learn how to be able to suit up, show up, be effective in my communication, depending on who the audience is. No, I'm not a chameleon, and no, I'm not a sellout. I choose to learn how to play that inside-outside game, to be on the inside, to get the resources to where I need them to go, to communities that are often disenfranchised and not at the table. Hence why I've been able to manage multi-million-dollar grant-making portfolios, build 5,000 units of affordable housing, and managed over $1 billion in investments for housing for low-income communities. Because if we're not at that table trying to push for those resources, then who the hell is going to be there for us?
Oh my goodness. Everyone should be clapping right now. Everyone should be clapping right now. Yes, that's the heart and soul of this book. I'm telling everyone that I know to read this because it's your voice that's pushing, people that haven't been at the table forward. So you have to keep doing that. I just want to thank you for everything, Jesse, for your honesty, your bravery, your kindness, your heart. It just completely came through all the pages of the book. And I feel like I know you now, even though I don't, but I do. And I can't wait to see you next week. So I'll hand it back to Susan.
We're going to have to change that. We're going to have to meet him in person. In fact, we can, because in September, for those of you who are in Southern California, we are going to be doing a 3-author panel event, Voices That Move and Inspire Us. And Jesse's going to be one of the featured authors. So we can't wait to meet you then. Thanks for your great questions, Amber. And I know we have just a bit of time more. So if anybody in the audience has questions or comments for Jesse, now's your chance to invite yourself up to join us on stage. But I was thinking about earlier, you were talking about your Harvard experience, and then also your business experience now, as you don't have to be a chameleon, but it made me think about code switching between worlds. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that concept of code switching and how it's played a role in your life, if at all, and what it means to you.
It can be exhausting. And I caught it when I was reading my audiobook. One of the things that I'm afraid of when people hear the audiobook is I didn't hold back. And I made a decision that if I cried, then I cried. And I wasn't going to ask for that part to be edited. That it's okay for men to cry. That it's okay for me to allow myself to be authentic and vulnerable, even if it means being criticized by others. Even if, and a friend of mine will text me, "Que chillon." And I'm like, yeah, I am a chillon. And I wear that crybaby sticker proudly, because you know what? For so long, I couldn't cry. And for so long, I couldn't show emotion. It's not what you do in the barrio when you're chilling with the homeboys. It's not like I can tell my homeboy, "Hey, Holmes, I'm feeling kind of vulnerable right now. What's it?" You know what I mean? And so code switching is something that I noticed in my book. And you will see when you read it and when you listen to it, the evolution of me as a person. And being able to be comfortable in my own skin, that metamorphosis of becoming that butterfly, and being okay that it's all a part of me. It's just how the important part for me of code switching is being able to still be authentic, my authentic self at my core. How, if my mom doesn't understand what I'm trying to do in my workplace, and I'm not communicating effectively so that my mother or other immigrant women, other immigrant mothers, if they don't understand what I'm fighting for, then I'm not doing my job effectively. If I'm building a housing unit and my mom, if I won't have my mom live in this apartment, then nobody should. And so my base is my mom. I hope that helps.
It does. And I was curious when you said you read your audiobook today and you cried. And I think that's the beautiful thing about having you read your own book for the audiobook, is that we get the authentic Jesse. But I'm curious, do you think your publisher will try to edit that out?
I don't know. I don't know. And there were some tough scenes in my book. For those of you that read it, there are some really tough scenes.
Because you know
And
they're all about marketing, right? And selling the book.
right.
So it's going to be interesting to see. We'll have to be determined. But I see that Jen has joined us on stage. And did you have a question or comment for Jesse? Welcome, Jen.
Thanks, Susan. I'm gonna just stay off video, but hi, Jesse. Thank you for sharing your story. I'm just so inspired by your ability to really take those words that people like to use as an insult, or take those identities and flip them and say I am, and to be proud of that. I think that that's so inspiring. I wanted to ask, if there was for you a first word or a first insult or a first thing that, what was that first thing that you thought it could be empowering if I can flip this and say exactly I am.
Great question.
Whew, that is a really good question. Um, but also because I've lived in so many different countries, and Mexican Spanish is very different than Puerto Rican Spanish. It's different than Cuban Spanish. It's different. And so we have words in Mexican Spanish like cabron that to us is just a word, and but to Puerto Ricans extremely offensive. And you know, I don't know. Let me not go down the path of the self-deprecating terms that I or me and my friends will often use with each other when we're joking with each other or whatever. I would say the first one for me was I'm an addict, and that's a tough one in recovery, or I'm an alcoholic. And being able to deal with addiction and alcoholism and acknowledging that I can't have a drink. I can't smoke a joint. I can't do a line of crystal. As soon as I do that very first one, I know I'm off to the races and I can kiss everything goodbye. So I would say one of the very first internally processed, taking a negative word and turning it to a positive is no, the lie is dead. Once an addict, always an addict is not necessarily true. I am an addict in recovery. I'm an alcoholic in recovery. And being able to admit that has set me free. I realized that I didn't lose the battle, I lost the war. I just can't. And so when I was at Harvard and I would go to these parties, and sometimes people would have wine and cheese and a plate of Coke, and I'm thinking, I'm at Harvard now. I'm hanging out with different people from a different social economic class now, and I think I can probably do a line of that cocaine with this nice bottle of red wine and expensive cheese. Is that Merlot or Merlot? So, nah, I can't. So I'm probably evading your question because it is really hard, that term. Chicano is one of those terms that often a lot of people from the generation before mine struggled with. And so to be able to identify as Chicano is one of those terms of turning it around and using it as a positive identity. There's different terms like puteria, mariconeria, blah, blah, blah. But I would say the ones that have been empowering for me are the ones that that just have impacted my daily life, which are the ones in recovery.
Thank you for sharing. I know there's, you know, a lot to pick from, and I think that there is so much empowerment, like you were saying, to be able to identify.
Like there's a group called, like, I think it's La Joteria Collective, right? And so I don't know, even me amongst my friends, we don't say, hey, what's up, Joto? We just don't. We'll say other words, but I've seen that used as reclaiming and empowering.
Yes, yeah, that was the word I was looking for, reclaiming. Well, thank you so much. I'm also the daughter of a lunch lady, so I've really appreciated your stories and you sharing everything. Thanks.
Thank you for your question and comments, Jen. And to make it three, I'm also the daughter of a lunch lady. So my mother was a German immigrant. I know. Here's to lunch lady moms. Let me tell you, there's no more hardworking, dedicated mothers around who do that thankless job. So uh, can we talk a little bit? Oh gosh, we're running out of time, so I have more questions for you, but I'm going to try to pick one or two more then, unless we have other questions from the audience. I don't want anyone to miss their chance to chat with Jesse. But we talked about culture clashes a little, and I know there's so many examples of that. But can you maybe talk a little bit about a culture clash that affected you the most, or that you've struggled with the most, or that you see our country struggling with or needing to address the most? That's probably a tough question because I feel like there's so many aspects of that.
Culture clash. Before I jump in to answer that question, is there anyone in the audience that wants to jump in with a question? Going once.
I know. This is their chance to chat with you, right?
Awesome. The oh God. The biggest thing for me is what I touched on earlier, is the individual, the collective, and the family. And so even in therapy, it's been very individualized. And sometimes I really wished that my therapy journey was more collective in nature. That the therapists, I wish that my siblings, my mom had access to Spanish speaking therapists that were experts in the modalities of brain spotting or EMDR or even parts work, because they've been so beneficial to me. But that goes back to me as an individual. So the biggest culture clash that I deal with, and I deal with this now, and I hope I'm not getting too vulnerable here. Sometimes I wonder, why do I stay in San Diego? I miss Miami. I would love to move to Kauai and live life in Kauai, swim in the open ocean, try to do my laps, walk everywhere. But I'm here because of my mom. This is where my mother is, and I need to be close to her because I'm her caregiver. And so that culture clash of hearing from people, well, you should go live your life and be happy. She lived her life and you should be able to live yours. There's this internal cultural guilt that I still deal with, that when I speak to other people of color that have gone through it, they understand what I'm talking about. And so the biggest culture clash for me, and I'm an American, I'm born here. So there must be something intergenerational. Maybe it's that intergenerational trauma of the individual self and the self that's a part of the family unit.
Yeah, good answer. So much to think about and process there, but I know we're running out of time, and so I have one question that I want to close on. But before I ask that last question, I just want to remind everyone that they can pre-order a copy of Jesse's memoir, I'm Not Broken, at any of your favorite booksellers, but especially on our website, adventuresbythebook.com, which is listed in the fortune cookie in the middle of your screen, which you'll see scrolling by with our website. The book is publishing in August, but if you pre-order it now, we will mail it to you and get it to you, and you can still chat with him for the coming two more weeks about his book and ask questions. And then we can have a reunion show after the book comes out and when everyone has a chance to actually read it and discuss it. But I see that Debbie has joined us on stage. Did you have a question or comment? And welcome, Debbie.
Hi, thank you. Hi, Jesse. Thanks so much for spending your time with us and sharing your story with us. I have a question and I don't know quite how to ask it, so please forgive me if I don't ask it. No disrespect intended whatsoever. I just don't know how to ask it, but I don't understand. So in different cultures, there are words that are derogatory, certainly that describe a culture, and I don't know what they are in your culture. I don't know. You talked about different words you would call each other. I don't know if I don't even know what's derogatory or okay. Like is Chicano, is that something that you within your culture call each other? So that's my first part of the question. I don't know if I'm explaining this well, but I think in the Black culture, there are certain words that are very derogatory that I won't even say. But my question is, sometimes I hear people within the culture calling each other those words, and I don't understand, is that okay or not okay? But it's not okay if someone that's not within that culture calls. Do you know what I'm asking? I don't know if I don't understand that.
I do. I do understand where you're coming from. I identify, well, depends on the audience, but I identify as Chicano. No, I'm not a Mexican from Chicago, which a lot of people think Chicano is, right? Chicano, oh, you're a Mexican from Chicago. Previous generations and some individuals today do not identify with the term. It started as a political term of identification. I will sometimes say, I'm an American of Mexican descent. So for a long time, I wouldn't identify as Mexican American. I felt that by hyphenating my American, it diminished my Americanness in the eyes of other Americans. I'm an American just like anybody else. And so I choose to say American of Mexican descent. Now, have I been criticized? I'm proud of being Chicano. I'm proud of my family and I'm proud of my heritage. Now, if you go to Mexico and you say Chicano, I mean, they call me a pocho. Pocho over there is a term of, well, you're not really a Mexican. You're a Mexican, but from over there. And here, you're not really an American. You're an American, but you came from over there. So you're kind of in this middle world. When people have introduced me as a Chicano leader or a member of the Chicano community, I don't take offense to it. If people say Mexican American, I don't take offense to it. I'll be damned if anyone calls me a maricon. I'll be damned if anyone calls me a joto, especially if they're not from my community. And so, I could be in Miami with my family friends or friends at dinner table laughing, and someone could say, niña, which is like girl, and I'll be okay with it. But let somebody call me girl that's not within my inner circle and just assume that level of freedom of being un igualado with me, I can't do it. So it's a really fine line to walk. And I don't even know if I'm answering your question. It's tough. There's certain terms that I despise that some Latino cultures use loosely. And I've had to tell people, don't call me that. I don't like that term. And they've been taken aback. But I do it in a way that says, I find that term really offensive. I know you use it freely, and I know you like to use it or throwing it around with your friends. For me, it brings up a lot of trauma and a lot of anger of being bullied. So please don't use that term with me. And that kind of sets the tone pretty cool because I recognize that we all come from a different starting place. And there was no ill intent when the majority of the time, there has been no ill intent when people are trying to fill me out. I hope that.
That's Yeah, that is helpful. So it's more. It sounds like it's more of a personal connection allows that familiarity to or understanding, I guess, of certain terms of I don't know that you'd call them endearment, but am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. That's helpful.
Thank you,
And
Deb.
and I'm enjoying listening to your story, and I'm inspired by what you're doing. I haven't read the book yet, so I look forward to reading it and to hearing your next segment. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Deb. Yeah,
Thank you, Debbie, for your question. And that's one of the beautiful things about the Fireside platform is it offers the opportunity for conversation and engagement. Um, I love that about the platform. Anyone can come up, converse live, ask your questions, get clarification, express your thoughts. So I know we're out of time, but I did want to remind everyone that we are going to be back for the next 2 weeks with Jesse on the following Tuesdays. I think the next one is July 5th. And episode 3, I believe we're going to talk about being the first generation college student in your family and Harvard grad, your identity as far as that is concerned. But if you want to hear more from Jesse, you can click on his image and follow him so that any time, including the next 2 weeks that he's on Fireside, you'll get notification of his events. You can do the same with Amber or me. You can click on our icons or anybody in our virtual audiences as well. You can click on any of their icons, read a little bit more about them. If you're intrigued, you can follow them as well. So I'm going to close that out with one final question for you, Jesse. What does the American dream mean to you?
Oh, wow. The American dream. Well, I'm living it. I don't know any other place in the world where a poor Mexican immigrant who came from a family whose parents were indigenous, of indigenous blood, mixed, but of indigenous blood. My dad went to the 5th grade in Mexico, my mom to the 3rd. I lived the life of sex work, drug addiction, substance abuse, and homelessness, and was able to graduate from Harvard University, UC Berkeley, and get a postgrad from UPenn. So 2 Ivy League institutions.
And publish a book.
Publish a book, and still do my best to improve the lives of others. That to me is the American dream. That my hope is that we are able to extend that American dream and make it possible for others. That we create an America that is tolerant, that is accepting, that allows people to be who they are in my totality, in our totality, so that I don't feel broken. Hence my title, I'm Not Broken.
I can't say anything to end the show better than those beautiful words. You are living the American dream. You're an inspiration that you've taken your challenges and your struggles and turned this into an experience that you're going to change the world one book at a time. It's an honor to be here with you today, Jesse. I can't wait to continue the conversation next week, July 5th. I'm Not Broken, Jesse Leon. Thank you. Thank you to everybody in our audience. Thank you, Amber, for co-moderating today and your great questions, and to those of you who asked questions. We look forward to seeing you next week. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.